What's going on, everybody? You guys are in for a treat. I'm interviewing the legendary Jim Wendler, and this was truly an honor for me to get a chance to interview what I would consider one of my lifting heroes. If you do not know who he is, we're going to get into that, but likely you guys, most of you do. He needs no introduction. He created and penned many books under this name, the very famous 531 program, a program of which I explained in this interview is one of the very few programs I could actually stick to because of one, primarily it's so effective, it's so simple, but also there's so many ways of going about tackling it. So you're going to hear us discuss that at length here. But I really want to make this introduction primarily one out of respect for Jim, because I look up to him and just, again, I consider him one of the dying breeds of strength conditioning coaches, especially as we get into this era of social media and just you don't hear people just creating books anymore. But primarily because you're going to hear him get into at length the passion he has for his volunteer work he essentially been doing for many years, working with a football team in Ohio in a small town where he lives, and just his success. But primarily you're just going to hear his passion. So even though you're going to hear him get into a lot about his athletes and what he does with that small football program and how it's grown and the effectiveness of that, I really want you to think in the back of your heads just how much you can still apply that just to our own everyday lives, whether that's going to the gym, applying these principles, and just at the very least some of these concepts that you guys can take some of his information and hopefully make it your own. Highly encourage you guys, if you do not know anything about this program, check out 531, his books, his resources. I will drop them down below. Thank you for watching, and again, really want to say sincere thank you to Jim. Off recording, he was such a solid guy. Also meant a lot that one of my heroes also happened to be just such a great person off recording. So just want to say that, and a big thank you to Jim, allowing him to come on this small channel of mine. So I'm here with the great Jim Wendler. I'll say legendary Jim Wendler. Got a chance to talk before I hit this record button. Super solid guy. I can tell right off the bat. So you're living up to all my hero expectations. And I'm not just saying this. You're going to brace yourself. We're just about to get praised for about like 2 minutes. So all right. So I would say of all the programs I followed since I was a kid, and actually if you would have told me I was going to be interviewing Jim Wendler, I'd be like, oh, it must be a pretty big deal. I'm not a big deal at all, but I would think just more, you're doing more of a public service now, jumping on here with me.
I love doing these. I do.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it means a lot. I mean, of all the programs I think I've ever tried to follow, I have a hard time sticking with them. But of all the ones, I'll get to this for sure throughout the interview about why I like the classical 531 system, and we'll plug his books throughout. He's got tons of books. We got two. We got Jim 531 Forever. And I'll be honest, this one is not my original. I think I've purchased this like 3 times because I was one of those people that, like, when I'm a kid, like, I got money, so I'll sell it on eBay and buy it again.
Yeah.
And it's like I got it, and then I buy it again because I'm like, well, I have to have the book. You know, I hate having digital books. And I will say this one, I'll be honest, this one is probably a magnum opus, but this one is so good and simple that I'm going off the rails here. That I was like, I don't even want to look at this one yet because this is almost, it's not a perfect book, but I want to say it's a perfect book.
Well, there's the best thing about that, and I did some, I would say research on this, but the less options people have sometimes, the better off they're going to be. If that's, if you just give them like, you do this, this, and this, and that's it. A lot of people don't like that, but a lot of people need to be told exactly what to do. They don't know that, but it just makes their thought process easier instead of wasting all the time trying to think, am I going to do 4 reps or 8 reps? Or am I going to do this exercise or this? Screw it. This is what you're doing. Let's get to it.
Yeah. And this was one of the few things that I could actually stick to because I had like a conceptual approach. And I got to stop in a second, have you introduce yourself in the program. Everyone probably knows who you are, but maybe some people who watch my channel don't, but this was one of the few programs I could actually stick to and have a template and still kind of do my own thing a little bit. Which is why I loved this so much. So before I go any further, just introduce yourself a little bit and just maybe history of 531.
All right. My name is Jim Wendler. I am the author and creator of 531. I grew up in the northwest side of Chicago. When I was just going into 8th grade, I was begging my dad for years to start training. And my dad said, if you start this, you can't stop, you can't quit. And I said, not a problem. And I haven't quit since. All of my training and all my knowledge really came from training for sports. So I was a football player. I ran and threw track in high school, but I went on and played college football at the University of Arizona. And then I got to learn a ton of stuff from all these different coaches, Dan Worth at the University of Arizona. And eventually after I graduated and I did graduate. I knew I needed some other outlet, and I've always been obsessed with strength. And so I started kind of dipping my toe into powerlifting. And then I don't even know what year it was. It's probably 1999, maybe. I read an interview with Louis Simmons, and I was like, I was kind of at a crossroads in my life. I know there was more to training than what I learned and all this other stuff. And I read an interview with Louis, and I was like, this guy's insane. But a lot of the stuff he said made sense. And more importantly, I was a very explosive lifter. He talked about being explosive. And I'm like, well, this is something I know I could do. It all made sense to me. For me, it was very easy to figure out. And then, so I started powerlifting. I did a graduate assistance at the strength and conditioning for the University of Kentucky. When I was there, I met Dave Tate. Everyone knows Dave Tate from Elite FTS. Eventually, I was hired by Dave. I was, I think, their first full-time employee. And then while I was working for Dave at Elite FTS, I was training at Westside. And over the years, just like everyone can imagine, if you're in this industry, you just get better and better. You meet more people, you learn more. Eventually wrote 531, which is very much based on how I trained through junior high school, and through football, through college. I kind of try to sum everything up. And what I really wanted to do with 531 was I wanted to make a program that would appeal to me when I was, junior high school, college, where I just was told exactly what to do. Basically, it has the principles that I've learned over the last, I guess it was probably 25 years. When I wrote the book, it was about 25 years. What's interesting about the principles that I lay out, I wrote the book first. I wrote everything first. And then when I went back and reread everything, I was like, oh my God, this is something, these principles really guide everything. And so what I realized, especially now, I'm now the strength and conditioning coach, I guess you call it. I volunteer at the local high school, and I've been working with the football team for, I think this is my 8th or 9th team. And we are an incredibly successful football team. We have a lot of really good kids. But over time, I see how these principles, how I can manipulate the program, and kind of fit a much younger clientele, so to speak, younger athletes. So all those principles have always remained the same. The training might change, the reps might change, stuff like that. But those principles, anytime I kind of hit a roadblock, I don't know what to do, I always go back to that. So if there's one thing, and I know people make fun of me all the time because I talk about principles, that's something that Dave Tate really stressed as a business, is always having principles. And anytime Dave would get a little off track, he'd always go back to those things. But anyway, I'm super pumped. Being part of the high school football program here. We are still in the playoffs. We're in the Elite Eight. And we are, I don't want this to sound bad, but since I've been here, we've had only one Division I athlete. We've had some very good athletes, but we're not overloaded with talent. We are a small school. I think there's 450 kids in our school. But since we started doing this style of training, our kids are incredibly consistent. We lift 50 weeks out of the year, and that's the truth. We don't take time off, but we're very consistent. And we have made the playoffs every single year. We probably pass the ball maybe 4 or 5 times a game. We're a very physical team. And I'm super proud of our kids. I could talk all day about how impressive our kids are, but to give you, our defensive line this year, I don't think there's a kid over 185 pounds.
Wow.
And it's unbelievable. So I got a lot of tough kids, but I have noticed that not so much in the NFL, because the guys are absolute freaks. And it almost doesn't matter what they do in the weight room, because they're always they didn't train their way to a 4.3 40. A lot of them. A lot of them are just fast and strong, and they were built like that. And you can see those kids at the high school level. But most of our kids are what I would call average dudes. And we train them in such a way that we always level a kid up. For example, if a kid is a starter, he'll turn into an all-conference player. If a kid isn't playing at all, we'll make them into a contributor. So we always try to level kids up one or two. And in the scope of high school football or any high school athletes or athletics, the majority of your team is going to be made up of just a bunch of good dudes. They're not going to be superstars. And I have found over, especially in this day and age where everyone's just general fitness is pretty low, you can get a huge leg up on your competition just by consistently training. My wife now volunteers at the junior high. I think this is her 6th year, maybe. So our junior high football team starts training in the 7th grade. So we have basically a 6-year program. It is run very militantly, so to speak. It is all the coaches and parents are really behind it. They see the progress we have made. But if you are part of a high school athletics, the most important thing is be consistent, be consistent, be consistent. And that doesn't mean just a couple of weeks in the off season or whatever. Like I said, we usually take maybe 2 weeks off a year. But I'm just super pumped to be part of it. I understand I am not the only reason why we're good, but it is a reason. So I love being part of the community.
This is really all a volunteer gig. So
Yep.
do you still do stuff with kind of the 5-through-1, or is there anything else kind of outside with one-on-one clients that you're still doing, or is this pretty much?
I train some people for free, just because I grew up doing stuff for free, and I think I should probably charge here and there. But a lot of the kids, if they go on to play college football, the door is always open. Obviously, you can't train them during the season or something like that. So, I've been playing around with being able to train someone one-on-one, but I have to do it on video. One of the things, I tell people all the time is I always have a plan going into the day, but it rarely ends up being the plan. I watch as much as I can. I watch kids' bar speed. I watch how they walk. If the kids are loud as hell and like crazy, I'm like, we're going to have a great workout because they got so much energy. If they're all down in the dumps and you can just tell, then we're going to back off. And I have no problems doing that. Like we train two days a week in the in-season. We've never missed a day since I've been here. We've never missed anything really, even through the summer vacation. Obviously, as we train right through winter vacation. I always like to tell the story. We had a training day fell on Christmas Eve. And I said, if you guys want to come in, we'll come in at 9 a.m. I'm not going to kill you guys, but you guys want to do it? We had 100% turnout on Christmas Eve at 9 a.m. And I was like, man, if that doesn't tell you, a lot about the community, the kids and the coaches, then I think that really just sets the tone. So, and then, the thing is we'll play some games and like we had, I think, and over 10 games, we were undefeated. We haven't lost this year, but I think we scored 551 points and gave up 34.
Wow.
So, and then everyone thinks, I always tell the kids, like, listen, the people in the stands, if we win 65-0, everyone thinks it's easy. Like, they don't know what it's like pushing the Prowler in January, because every Friday we push the Prowler, rain, shine, snow, ice, we're getting to it. But that's how those kind of games are won. It's the miserable times. And like one of the kids said, it's like, coach, it doesn't have to be fun. It's fun when you win. So it was a sophomore. He's like, this doesn't have to be fun, coach. And I was like, you're probably right. None of this is fun. So,
and this is all basically same kind of principles, 5-3-1 principles. Yep. You're still pretty much using. You probably get this question a lot where people trying to pigeonhole, like, well, what is this program? And I think I had the powerlifting book too at one point. Is this a powerlifting program? Is this a strength program? Is it a strength and conditioning program? I would say it's the latter. It's the strength. I would say it's strength conditioning program. As far as principles, I don't know. But I also like what you said one time, which maybe this is kind of like the direct question, which is how much of it is conceptual or versus like, here's what you should follow versus, I think one time you called it, one interview, you might have said this multiple times, like the vanilla ice cream approach, where like you kind of have the bowl of vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, and then
like
you could start adding
and throw everything else on top of it. I love that because in my brain, I would do the 5-3-1 template. Once I did those lifts, I kind of, for the most part, just have at it and did some other stuff, and it worked out great.
Yes. Well, you can, I wrote an article, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago called Training for Busy and or Inconsistent Men or something. And I gave everyone the kind of the base of the program. This is for guys, especially if you've got a newborn or you're super busy at work or you're, whatever. You got a bunch of stuff going on, and it allows you to alter and auto-regulate your training based on that day. So if you had 8 hours of sleep and your wife's not driving you bonkers and your boss is fine, then you can do X, Y, and Z. If everything's stressed out, then you can do, just A, B, and C or whatever. So I think even with, my wife uses the program, obviously, and her kids are radically different than the kids that I coach. We just change the variables here and there. And as I've gotten better as a coach, I always say coaching is different than training. Our coaching is communicating a program and training a large group of people. So we have generally about 50 to 60 kids. When there's one of me and 50 or 60 kids, coaching is a lot different than one-on-one training. But even with the big coaching, you have to make changes every single day based on the kid's readiness, and but you can alter the training based on everyone's preparedness. So if a kid is severely overweight, then we can do X, Y, and Z, and they can still participate in the program. I don't want kids feeling left out ever. And the other thing, I probably said this a million times, the one thing I always try to do is, because we are so consistent, and I can't tell you how important consistency is, because when you're consistent, you don't have to slam the kids into the ground. And this is especially true during the season. I think in-season training is the most important part of training for a football player. So we always want our kids to be stronger at the end of the season than they were in the summer. It just makes sense. That's when the playoffs are. That's when you need to be stronger. But when you are consistent, you don't need to play catch up at all, especially during the season. So if we need to back way off, we're fine, because we've got 8 months of training behind us. Some of these kids have 6 years of training behind them. They're going to be fine. And I think that's one of the big things with, I guess, this program or any other. If you can figure out a way to do this, it's not reliant on you doing X weight for X reps before you go to the next day. Mm-hmm. I think that's something I've really learned. I don't, like, during this season, we've had massive PRs on the trap bar and massive PRs on the bench for a lot of the kids, not just the JV kids and the freshman kids, but some of the varsity guys. And we have not changed the training maxes for any of the lifts, none. Mm-hmm. And all I did was manipulate the variables, the rest periods, the amount of sets and stuff like that. And so if you're kind of smart enough to figure some of that stuff out, then you can really start playing with it. But whether or not a kid plays basketball or wrestles, the program generally stays the same. The only things we change are the little, like you said, the sprinkles and the caramel or the chocolate syrup or something like that. So, and then obviously if the kid's running a lot, like we back some of the lower body stuff off because we're running more. Mm-hmm. And that's fine too. But the base always stays the same.
I can hear somebody hearing this, and then they might be thinking, I'm not a high schooler. I'm a 35-year-old or 35, 45, 55.
Yeah, but you're the same thing as a high school athlete. You're fucking tired all the time. You're running.
100%. So that's I can see people like, I'll use, actually, and I first said this at the start, I've gone back to your, which is, I was actually ironic because I reached out to you, I think, maybe 2 weeks after, maybe a month after I was starting to do it again. But I went back to the basics of just doing this because I was kind of I was doing different stuff with the channel, trying to mess around, getting back to weight training, what worked for me. And I could actually stick to or adhere to, which was your program, but also allowed me to kind of try other modalities too. So doing some more explosive stuff again, which I just kind of put in the back burner for working out in the gym or my home gym, garage gym, which I'll get maybe that stuff later. But I think as they get older, people are like, especially if you're working out at home for the sake of time, and you're like, I don't have access to a big, like, I can't mess with all the toys I used to want to mess with, like plyo boxes and stuff. And so I can see some people thinking like, well, just, I guess, touching on that, like just applying some of the principles, just strength and conditioning principles to make you just overall, I'll just say the word better athlete, even though you're not maybe competitive in a sport, but the person who might just be, instead of getting out of the grind of, I'm just going to do bodybuilding and that's it, versus power sport development, strength conditioning.
Yeah. So this is where it starts getting weird, especially, let's just say you're a middle-aged dude. You got to be fairly smart about this stuff. So, let's just pretend you're mostly bodybuilding, and then you kind of want to get a more athletic style training program. There's a couple things I would recommend. One is you got to find some kind of conditioning that you can perform, and it doesn't have to be sprints. It does not have to be running. One thing I always try to tell people is like I do sprints, but I'm not going to rerun in sprints. So I do sprints on the Airdyne bike. All right. I do long walks, like either with a weight vest or you just go for like an 8-mile walk. You don't have to go for 8 miles, but the bottom line is it's just something kind of easy. So that's kind of like your, low and slow, so to speak. And then I try to get some kind of prowler work in. So it's, hardcore lower body, you're really straining and stuff like that. Now you can obviously go a little bit lighter, but the bottom line is you got to find some kind of conditioning, I guess the best way to say it, modalities that you can handle. So I don't want a guy who has no athletic background is doing bounding over high hurdles or think he's going to go outside and run sprints. It's just not physically. Dude, everyone pulls a hamstring or tears an Achilles. It's almost 100%. Even if you do have that background, your body's just not ready for it. So that's number one, is find stuff you can do. And I don't care. Like I do a ton of, I go over to the high school stadium, I put on a weight vest and walk up and down the stairs. And, it doesn't look like much until you spend an hour over there and your legs are, shaking. But that's like one of my hard lower body workouts. It's almost, I don't want to say it's athletic, but it's something different. You're working hard. The same thing with the prowler. Hell, you put on I call it the old man ranger test. The Army Rangers have a 12-mile ruck that you got to finish in 3 hours. The old man ranger test is you put on a 20-pound vest and you just walk for 12 miles. There's no time limit. You just got to finish. And what was the other? Well, the prowler and the sled. But the bottom line, so that's number one. Number two is I think everyone needs to do some kind of mobility or flexibility work, whether or not that's, the basic like Agile 8 from DeFranco, if that means you're going to do yoga for 10 minutes every day. Or some kind of dynamic warm-up, something like that. I think that's super important, especially as you get older. I see it, my parents are super active. They're in their late 70s and they're still kicking ass. But like getting on and off the ground. And I know like this is not, I'm talking, when you get a lot older, but when you lose that hip mobility, that stuff becomes a factor. So I think instead of waiting for that to happen, learn how to do it. And again, I am horribly inflexible, but my goal when I do my mobility and flexibility is not to get mobile or flexible, just to feel better and be able to do stuff. So that's number two. Number three is, this is how I train our kids. And this is our barbell work. I treat like almost like Olympic lifts, meaning our training maxes are fairly low. Every rep has to be crisp and awesome. We're looking for perfect form, technique, and we don't hyper load that. I don't get obsessed with the loading of the training. Okay, it's super important to understand this. And then on the assistance work, we talked about earlier about like changing stuff up. Then we just build muscle, because I think building muscle is a giant thing with everyone, especially in this day and age with young athletes. So much emphasis put on speed and all this other stuff. And I got this from the great Boyd Epley. If you don't know who Boyd Epley is, figure it out, because he's the fucking king of this stuff for athletes. He is the king. His theory or his protocol, I watched him say this at a seminar. He's like, what's the number one thing you should do with your athletes? And everyone's, raising their hand, but everyone's sheepishly raising their hand because it's Boyd Epley. He's the king. And he's like, no, that's good. That's good. No, but that's good. He said it's building muscle. And especially with young athletes, or if you're just an average dude, quit trying to load the bar before you look like you can load the bar.
Yeah.
And so we use our assistance work as bodybuilding, so to speak. We always talk about building armor, or we build up the prom muscles. Or I always like to say, listen, when we step off the bus at the weight game, I want to look like we kick ass. That's the main goal. All right. Now, a lot of that has to do with diet. Obviously, genetics are part of that. But when we really started pushing the fast bar speed on the barbells and bodybuilding the shit out of the assistance, everything kind of opened up. And what ended up happening is, it drives the kids nuts. But I have enough clout now. We've had so much success here that the kids just, fine, I'll do it. This is a good example. When we do our trap bar is an off-season lift and an in-season lift. During the in-season, we take out the barbell squat, just too much stress on the hamstrings, and we use the trap bar. And that's a whole other discussion. But anyway, we had our JV kids tested on their trap bar on the 10th week. So the last game, the week of the last game. The heaviest these kids have lifted, there was like, I think 10 kids who's the main brunks of their training for the trap bar was around 205 to 225 pounds, somewhere in that area. Okay. Every one of those kids that were at the 205, so their work sets were at 205 or 225. Every one of those kids, when we tested, did 300-pound trap bar for 10 or more reps. Now, of course, the day after, these kids are a little tired and sore, but what we just proved is we don't need to lift super heavy all the time to get strong. We just need to do great reps done with precision. And I always like to tell the kids, this is not exactly true, but I said the greatest expression of strength for you guys is to have speed. And, Louis used to say this all the time. And this is, I learned at an early age to always lift explosively, but then Louis just took it to another level. You could probably say Fred Hatfield too. But Louis always said, what's the main reason why men are faster than women? It's because they're stronger. They have more muscle. And, let's just be honest, like everyone wants to, this was the best part about the steroids in baseball. Everyone said, no one's taking steroids in baseball to get stronger or bigger. They do it for recovery. I'm like, I don't know I know everyone in the world that I know takes steroids. Every single dude I know has taken something, and not one of them has said recovery. It's to get jacked and get stronger. That was it. And so we have proven, whether or not you agree with baseball or not and all that stuff, this drove me nuts about baseball, is we proved if you got a little stronger and put on some muscle, you're going to be better. All right. It's obviously not going to make up for talent and all that other stuff and skill. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the kids as muscular as possible and to be explosive as possible. And for a young athlete or anyone who doesn't have a ton of background with this, I have found that those things, the conditioning, the mobility and flexibility, and fast bar speed on the barbell lifts and bodybuild the assistants. Now there's a whole are kind of the keys. The other good thing is when you don't have to load the barbell so much. And listen, dude, I grew up wanting to load the barbell. Of course, everyone knows how that goes. But what ends up happening, I tell the kids all the time, the barbell giveth, but the barbell taketh away too. There is a recovery aspect to that you don't understand. Now let's, so our kids practice on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they play on Friday. I can't train them hard Monday through Thursday and then scratch my head while they took a dump on Friday. Like, it's stupid. Even so, let's say in the off season, if I kill the kids on Monday, they're going to come back Wednesday and feel like crap. So we've lost that workout. And then maybe we get to Friday when the kids feel okay. If you keep on repeating that cycle, it's going to be weeks before you get back up. So that's the magic for consistency, is we don't load the athletes terribly on the barbell stuff. We just want great reps. And again, it frustrates the kids. But when we do a test day, everyone's like, holy shit. I'm like, yep. See how this all works out? And almost 100% of the time I'll ask the kids, if they do a crazy workout on like a test on Friday, I'll see them on Saturday. I'm like, how do you guys feel? Like, oh my God, man. Like everything's, I'm tired, sore. I'm like, yeah, that's why we don't do that. I can't have you feeling like this, the day after of all the training. From a kind of normal average everyday thing, your recovery is going to be compromised because you're older, your testosterone's probably lower, you're stressed out. So this is one of the ways we get around it, provided you are consistent and provided that you have great intent and bar speed with the barbell lifts. So, and then again, the assistants, you can kind of push that harder because, doing a set of dumbbell squats with a 100-pound dumbbell is impressive for a lot of people, but that's a 25 and a 2.5 on the barbell. If you just did squats with a 25 or 25 on each side, you're not going to be tired. So there's a way of getting around a lot of that stuff. And it's funny too, because of all the lifts in the weight room, for us, the dumbbell squat is the most competitive. It is. And kids talking more trash, kids getting mad if he beats, a record. Like we had, I think our 100-pound record right now is 70 reps. They've done 70 straight reps with the 100-pound dumbbell. And,
just holding it one, just vertically, horizontal?
Yeah, like a goblet squat. So, but that is like and then we have our we have standards for the dumbbell squat, and our kids always hit them. It's unbelievable and this is another thing, is our standards are very high. I'm not saying we're perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but our standards for attendance, for bar speed, for effort, and all that stuff are very high. I don't want to water that down because the kids want standards. They want to achieve great. They want to feel good.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I always, as a coach, is I want our kids to have daily wins. So if they look like crap, something just going wrong, I'm going to change the workout so they have some success. The last thing I want them to do is put a weight on the barbell and then get crushed, and then they're just feel like crap. And, I hear this all the time about building kids' self-esteem. You don't do that by telling them that they're great. You have them prove it. You have them do hard things that are appropriate for them and have them succeed. Now, they're not always going to succeed, but it's amazing. Like, oh my God, I can do it. And one of the things I tell the kids, and I'm adamant about this, I say, I train you guys like I want one of my sons to be trained. I will never ask you to do anything that I know you can't do, ever. Right. Because I've seen coaches load athletes. I would, if that was my son, I'd kill that coach, because you're screwing with his body, man. That's something that they get hurt at. It drives me nuts. Like, I know I'm probably terribly passionate about something that maybe is not that big of a deal, but it really. And then the other thing is, like, we played some teams this year. If I was a parent of one of the athletes, I'd be very mad, because that's the best you guys could do for my son. Like, that's and it's just poor effort. Everything was just bad with some of these teams. And I'd be mad. Like, I wouldn't want my kid to come out of his high school career. He's probably not going to play in college, most of these kids. I'm like, that's the memories you're going to leave my kid,
Yeah.
So anyway, I know I'm probably getting off topic here, but it
really makes me
upset. So,
well, I think a lot of what you're saying can apply to that. Like you said, you've already been hitting this, the general public, even if they're not even a younger person. This is as we're talking, I'm trying to formulate this in like one question, but I don't know if I'll do my best to do this.
Go ahead.
You've obviously been around a long time. I'm sure you've had your fair share of people criticizing the way you're doing things or having their opinions on doing stuff. But I find more so, at least now, because I'm like, just with the channel, whatever, I see a lot more people's comments coming in, especially it seems like with the rise. And I was dabbling in, and I have genuine interest in it, but I'm also cognizant of my own gut feeling, my intuition, what I do of like, well, this doesn't make sense. Basically juggling what the science is saying and, these experts on whatever, Instagram or whatever social media, and this idea of like, well, everything has to be sequenced a certain way. Like, there's basically one ideal way of training. And so if someone hears what you're saying, says like, well, I'm going to do 5-3-1, or I have all these other variables, going back to my point of, say, high intensity training, I'll use that as an example.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of people say, well, you can just do high intensity principles, take those long days off, and that basically somehow can apply to strength and conditioning. So cardiovascular conditioning isn't necessary. Just do their sport, just do high intensity for their strength training, muscle building. The rest will take care of itself. Versus when I've experimented with that, I found the opposite, where I can train to failure with relatively lighter weights and I actually feel worse off from a performance standpoint, even 4 or 5 days later, than when I was doing heavyweight, all sorts of randomized, quote unquote, stuff. But I felt, no question, more athletic and more prepared to face whatever's coming my way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, because when I first started getting into like training, I was, 8th grade was really the time. And the big pissing match was between what they back then sports specific was squat, bench, deadlift, clean. That was sports specific, and which is hilarious now because it's not like that now. And high intensity training, the one set to failure, mostly using machines and stuff like that. Now, listen, there's a lot of guys who can get a lot out of that, and I think it does work well for a small amount of time. But whether you're I'm just going to use a 35-year-old dude, or you're a 2-sport athlete in high school, you can't smash the crap out of yourself all the time. It just doesn't work. It works just like it works for people when they make their New Year's resolution. It works for about 2 weeks, and then you don't want to do it anymore because you feel like crap. But our kids we run year round. So I have to factor that in. Like, listen, we're doing a lot of running, not a lot of running, but we're running consistently. So I just don't. There was when I first started volunteering at London, I remember I was sitting right at this desk, and I'm like, well, we're going to see how good I really am, because we were not a very good team. And I'm like, well, maybe all this stuff is bullshit. Maybe it just works, with a select few people. So when we've had so much success, and again, it's not just me, you have to understand that, but we're very successful with what we do in the weight room. And so when you hear the criticisms like, well, this and that, and I always say the same thing, ask the guys we play then. Ask how crappy our training is, because we might maybe I have one really good player on the team, but when all, the entire offensive line weighs, 190 pounds and they've all deadlifted over 400, well, maybe we're on something, So the older I get, the less ego I have a lot about this stuff, but at the same time, the more assured I am, because I know I'm doing, at least what I'm doing is working with the kids that I work with. Does that make sense? Like, so when I see all this stuff on social, that would have bothered me maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But once you start having some success and you start really believing in what you're doing, I just let everything else kind of go. And if someone wants to do something, like there's a million ways to get stronger. And I always reference this. We all know about the Russians' way of training through the Russian manuals, and the Bulgarians. They both trained, were very good at the same time, vastly different training systems. You know what I'm saying? Like vastly different. You couldn't get more A to Z, so to speak. So I'm always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I just don't care that much. I mean, we're having success, and I know what we're doing is making the community better. I'm making the kids better. But a lot of this stuff with how I train the kids will work for just about anyone. Like we talk about the principles, but even just the good fast bar speed, it saves your joints as far as like loading. And the other thing, I know this is out of left field. Like the other thing is you're always going to have a good day. If there's times I'm sure you've loaded 315 on the bar, and that first rep, you're like, oh my God, dude, how did I do this for 10 reps before? But when you're a little bit lighter, the weight's going to be solid. You might not have a great day, but you're going to be okay. And I remember training as a young man, I'd have all these, everything was, like a huge diagram, on my chalkboard or my bulletin board with all the strings. It was like a murder board at a police precinct. And I remember just some days I'm like, how was I so bad today? Just get you, I would never get depressed. I would just get really angry. So this is one of the ways around it. I know that's kind of out of left field, but I don't know. Like I get a lot of that, or at least I used to, about the science stuff and all that other stuff. But the one thing you have to understand, and I got this from, the book, Murphy's Law. It's written by Jack Murphy, who was a Army Ranger. I don't know if he was a Green Beret, but he talks about like the 7 factors or 7 tenets of special forces. We talk about, or special operations. We talk about principles. The number one thing is humans over hardware. And so the bottom line is I don't think that whether we do 5 reps or 8 reps, I don't really think that matters as much as the coach leading everyone and the kids' dedication to it. Mm-hmm. I think that
there's a lot of stuff that seems like it's explained philosophically. I'm only using this because I'm not trying to hit on this group of people, because I let people watch channel because of this stuff. But like the Mike Mentzer philosophy can be explained away scientifically or philosophically as like, well, this obviously makes sense because of just whatever reason justifying it. But then when you put it to the road and it's like, and you try it yourself, like some things, aren't as clear cut as they might seem. I think you were lucky too, because you came around in a time where I was actually gonna say this too. Like this is maybe one of the last great strength books that's out there. Your 5-1 for. Okay, I mean, I had some here actually queued up because I got tons of these, like old super squats and brawn, dinosaur training. Yeah. Back when people made books that you could digest and sit down with, versus now, I don't even know. Like if you put this concept out, like would Jim Wendler be around if you came out now versus when you did at the time? People can actually sit down, digest it, and try and apply it.
Yes, and a lot of people were like, I came around at the right time and stuff like that. But if I'm going to be honest, it was I'm probably the worst businessman. I had no real big plan with this stuff. But I do think it is a different era. I think it's probably a little bit easier to get noticed, but at the same time, you're in a big sea of stuff too, because of social media. I don't know if, there's room for another 531 or, something like that. I just don't know. But I always think that there's going to be a need and a desire for like physical stuff in like long form, just like 15 years ago, you would have never guessed that long form podcasts like Joe Rogan would be so popular, but it is. People are hungry for it. I still buy all my music. I don't buy any digital music. I do all physical copies because I like a physical copy. So I think there's always going to be a place for that stuff. It's just not going to be, probably not as big, or at least initially not as big. And the other thing is I'm sure if you're a true, like what I call like a lifer in this business, and you have like a good heart and your intentions are good, I know this sounds really, really stupid, but I think you are going to have some success. I really do. Because people can see through the crap. And, one of the things when people ask me about coaching, whether it's, training people like a trainer or coaching people, I said, one of the most important things is the kids will know bullshit, or the people you work with will know bullshit. They may not see it right away, but it will show. And I think that's super important as a coach, trainer, or even if you're just coaching yourself, is you have to be someone that you would want to be led by. And I think that's a super important concept. And when I became a father, I understood that, but you don't really see it until you got 60 kids staring at you. And you're like, how do I present myself? How do I talk? Of course, I probably use way too many swear words, but the kids know whether or not they like me or not, that I genuinely care. And you have to, if you're just yourself, like you have to be someone that you want to be led by. Don't put yourself down all the time. If you eat like crap, man, like clean that stuff up. Be something better. And you'll be surprised at the reaction you get, not just from yourself, but from the world around you.
Yeah.
So
I think you don't see many people like you anymore too. I mean, the classic where, strength coaches were almost like cut from the same yarn. It seemed like, there's into strength training, and it just doesn't seem like I don't want to say like, maybe I'll say like, it's just like the masculinity side has kind of gone along. I mean, I don't know. It's just different. That's what I would say. I'm going to be,
it's a different world, man.
Yeah.
I've kind of got grandfathered in, so I can probably get away with a little bit more than most people. Like when a lot of this woke stuff came out, I got hit pretty hard.
I bet. I was gonna ask.
Yeah, and and this was, I don't know what year this was, but it was just funny because I'm like, I'm not going to apologize. Like, dude, I said gay. You really think I have like hate in my heart for that stuff or anything, and then some people started getting bananas on me. I'm like, listen, dude, you go yourself. Like, I'll be fine. Like, I'm not going to apologize to you or anyone else. But I think the, social media is a weird,
you think it's replaced fathers in some ways? I mean, I was going to get into this whole topic. You've dressed it up, and I know you talked finally about your father and how important that is. And now if you're distracted or maybe your father, maybe obviously if you don't have a father figure, I think that's obviously you're at a disadvantage there. But then you're looking to social media where you're getting multiple influences, and we're all product of influence in some way. But
the one thing I thought about this, and I don't know if this is exactly true, but I think a lot of like when I was growing up, like we had people to look up to, sports or whoever the hell it was, and I didn't want to know all the bad stuff that these people did, or if they cheated on the wife, or had too many kids out of wedlock. Some of that stuff I didn't want to know, because I don't think it's important for a young man to have people to look up to aspire to. And I think with the way that the social media and stuff is in like the 24-hour news cycle, it's probably like a 2-hour news cycle now.
Yeah.
I just feel like everyone's searching for dirt, and I think it's replaced a lot of like legends in the world where, instead of looking up to so-and-so, and I don't look up to him as a so-called like a human, but like this guy, went to war and he, did this and that. And then he played high school, whatever. Then he played like professional, like all these cool things and these guys you had to look up to. And I think everyone's digging up dirt on people. And I think it's kind of destroying some of the legends and heroes that kids could look up to today. And I think maybe it doesn't replace the dad, but replaces like the mythos that people used to really grab onto as like a form of inspiration. And one of the things, like I'm sure you've seen the TV show Vikings with, what is it, Ragnar Lothbrok. And I just did a quick search on, Ragnar and all this stuff. And most people believe that it was or at least some people believe it was it was a whole bunch of people who did a lot of great things, these Viking leaders, and they just consolidated all into one person. He became like this central figure. And he was the guy that did this and this. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it was like, it's cooler. Like whether or not it's true or not, the bottom line is all this stuff was done, and look what you can do if you kick ass and take names and whatever you want to say about that. But I think that stuff's super important for young men to have people to look up to. I just hate to see everyone being put down. And for the littlest stuff, and some of the stuff is major, but I still, like, I'm a very private person. That's one thing I don't understand about social media is everyone's willing to air out their dirty laundry. And I just like, dude, I hate that stuff. It drives me nuts. Like, don't say that. Like, I don't need to know, whatever. So I think that we talked about Ghost before we were firing up. Like, I like the mystery, and everyone's wanting to figure out who Tobias Forge was. I'm like, I don't, no. I don't want to know. I just wanted to, think it's this crazy Pope dude. That's fine. So I think a lot of that mystery is gone. I think the mystery is important. I don't think we know everything.
Yeah, I think it's just someone like you too. I think just that I said at the start, that legendary status, I think is just important because, like I said, it is something. If you don't have that tangible book, I think you're more than likely to kind of fall by the wayside of something else. And you've been good about this. I don't know where I heard you talk about this, but you don't have like delusions of grandeur of, I think you're humble at heart in the way you kind of talk about yourself and the program, what you expect about the legacy of what this will do and kind of how it lives on. I think that's all.
Like I don't have any visions of immortality. And I think about this, I thought about this is like how many so Trump is going to be what, the 47th president? Is that, I don't know, something like that. Yeah. So how many, there's 40 besides Trump, like how many presidents can you name? And it's like, that's the president of the United States.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't even know him. Like, what makes you think you're any special? And it's not, I'm not trying to be like pessimistic about it or, have like a nihilistic view. It's just like, I'm okay with raising my kids. I'm okay with helping my community. I'm good with that. Like, I don't need to, if anything lives on, that's fine. But like, it doesn't shape how I act today because I think it's more important. Like you always do see bumper stickers that says, think globally, act locally, And so I think it's more important to help my neighbor out than it is to have like a social media presence. That doesn't mean that's bad. But I'm more concerned about that. One of the things I talked about this in one of my YouTube things. I'm like, when I'm wherever I am, I try to be. So when I'm in the weight room with the kids, I don't look at my phone, unless I'm timing something or whatever. When I'm with my oldest son, Mason, I stay off my phone. If I'm driving, of course, I'm not going to be on my phone, but I try to interact with the people and I try to be there. And as a father, I think it's super important. I told this story. My oldest son, Mason, grew up in Texas. I lived in Ohio. I would make that trip once or twice a month. And I always like to let him know how much debt I went into because of him. So he did. But when I was with him, like I didn't get a lot of time with him. So I just wanted to be, and I didn't matter what we did as long as we were together. I think that's one of the things I talked about. If you have a long distance relationship with one of your kids or something, or your family, you don't need to go on these elaborate trips or have all this. They just want to hang out with you. That's it. And I think that's, I just think it's more important than putting something up on social media. Like, this is my time with my kids. And the same thing with training. I get, why don't you record your workouts? Because like the workout's not for you. Like, this is my time. And my wife and I, we both know when we're in that weight room, that's our time. Buzz off. Obviously, if you got a question or something, that's one. But that's my time. I don't need to spend it with anyone else.
Yeah,
I cherish that time, man. I love it. Like, that's the best part. One of my best parts of my day. Go in that weight room, get everything settled, set everything up. It's an awesome time. So
I'm making a big U-turn now because I want to make sure I cover this about the and that was awesome. All that stuff. So I had to just like totally, just cutting it there. You added something in the addition of the 5-3-1 forever, so that would be good. And this was maybe a little segue about talking about the idea of just putting in work and overall conditioning. The idea of just doing jumps and throws. Yeah, I think a lot of people now they focus, especially in later age. I think most people, 99% of people, it's like just aesthetics and bodybuilding is the focus. Maybe adding some extra weight in the bar and stuff, but maybe people lose sight of the idea of just power and explosiveness, and that's an episode. Go ahead.
Well, you saw it with I watched a few I'd be honest, like half a round of the Tyson fight, and he's 58 years old. And Mike Tyson is legendary, and I was like, man, can you see the loss of explosiveness? Now he's 58 years old, so he's still super, super impressive. But that got my wife and I talking about that. And, one of the things besides muscle mass is you lose the ability to kind of be explosive. And I think if you can do some kind of jumping, and I think I hate, people will criticize this jumping rope, I think would be good for a lot of people. I still do box jumps, but the way that I do them very much similar to how Louis did with some of his guys. They would sit on a box first and explode up. I think it's much easier on your body. I think the box jump is the easiest thing you could do, especially if you do a box squat box jump. And it doesn't have to be super high. You don't have to jump on a 40-inch box. Just jump on something you can handle, especially early on. I have I think a 12-pound med ball that I still throw. And if I'm doing 15 throws, those first 5 throws are super lazy. And I just start working up. And again, it doesn't have to be maximum insanity. But it is an unbelievable, especially if you're not used to it, you'll feel stuff. You're like, and so you got to be a little careful. But I think, again, you don't need to do a lot. Even like we do jumping every single time we train, even during the season. We don't do maybe we might do a total of 25 or 30 total contacts and stuff. But I think it carries over just for the regular person more so than I think people realize. I just think it needs to be tailored for your specific, for your general physical preparedness and your readiness. And one of the things that you might be able to do, we talk about jumping ropes. We do a lot of what we call pogo hops, and most people can do pogo hops. Man, I'll tell you what, how about the jumping jacks? You're kind of bouncing off your feet. I know it sounds very remedial, but don't crap on jumping jacks. I don't know if anyone's seen the video of when our guys went over to Afghanistan and helped some of the Afghanistan army. There's a video of the Afghanistan army doing jumping jacks.
I did see that.
One of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. And I don't want to they didn't grow up with that, but in the United States, at least it used to be like, if you were 10 years old, you could do jumping jacks and jumping rope forever. And I just remember when I watched that video, of course I laughed and I was like, well, that's kind of a dick thing to do, but I'm a dick sometimes. But you realize how important it is to get some of those basic movements down.
Well, and sadly, probably most high school gym. Well, I think most gym classes are gone now, but
no, it's bad.
I don't know how many kids can actually do a jumping jack nowadays.
Yeah.
Most American
kids, we still do jumping jacks. Like we do 6 and 4 count strict burpees. We don't do it as conditioning. We do it as like a mobility warm up. And it's unbelievable if you do that stuff right. Like do 20 jumping jacks, 10 6 or 4 count burpees. So it's like the true burpee. We're not jumping up in the end and doing anything crazy. We do mountain climbers, and those are like our 3 basic calisthenic stuff that we do. And it's go 20 jumping jacks, 10 strict burpees, and 10 mountain climbers per leg. And we do mountain climbers where you bring that leg up all the way by the hand. So it almost looks like you're doing a lunge. Dude, you are warmed up. Like you are ready to go. And again, you get some great mobility work. A lot of people have super tight hips, so even the burpee gets difficult. So I would, put your hands on a raised surface like a bench or something. But you'd be surprised if you jump back up from a burpee the hip mobility is unbelievable. I have the kids sit in down position for a little bit when they jump up, and a great little activation for your central nervous system, right? Because you're going from the top of a push-up position, you're jumping onto your feet explosively. I think all that stuff is super important. So
you do kind of lose it. I mean, I know the last few years working out in my home gym, I've ditched that because either space or like, well, I got 30 or 40 minutes. I just want to jump into the weight stuff.
Yeah.
And I got out going back into, which honestly was a lot of it from just going back to year material, to be totally honest with you, incorporating the stuff. I'm like, man, I used to love doing it. And I can just already see the trade-off. Just like, popping back up faster than I used to. Yeah. So super valuable stuff.
It's one of the, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's massive with that. And I think, I'm in my garage. It's not a very big garage, and you have to maneuver some stuff around to do it. But I think it's worth it. And here's the other thing is if you feel like you don't have time, one of the things I used to do when I was in high school is like between my bench or squat set, I do a set of 2 or 3 jumps. So you're going to be resting anyway. It kind of gets your body revved up, so to speak, or, get a little nervous system activation. Obviously it shouldn't be done as conditioning. I think that's kind of a bad thing. Doesn't mean it's not right for some people. I just think for the majority of people, I don't think it's very smart. One of my things, my wife is in tremendous shape. She just jumps on top of the bench press bench. What is it, 18 inches? It's not very tall. And she could clear it like easily. She probably jump on a 32-inch box, but it's just a little bit of explosiveness kind of gets you going. And there's a million ways of doing it, but that's might be the easiest way to do it within a small area. Is just jump on your bench and then land. Always tell the kids we got to land strong and land correctly. But if you, as an older person, just step down, regroup. And then, but every time you do a bench set, you might do a set of, I always have the kids do some pull-ups or something, or push-ups between squats or something like that. So,
and we're remiss if I hadn't asked this question, because I also want to really respect your time. But I got a lot of people ask about, resistance bands, and a lot of people, go back to that are really pro resistance bands in a really diehard way. But like they'll go back to Louis Simmons and West Side Barbell, and how that's proof that bands work and are superior in some ways. Well, some will say it's superior. What are your thoughts on resistance bands? How much do you think Louis, I know he obviously implemented resistance bands, but I guess overall take on resistance bands, their effectiveness, and how they compare to, say, free weights?
So the one thing people need to really understand about Louis is he's probably the smartest man I've ever seen in the history of the world with strength training. And I think Louis's mind's always about 20 years ahead or 10 years ahead of everyone else. And I think that was just going to be the next logical step, because Louis was never content with being content. I believe that the number one thing that it helped, and I know this is going to piss a lot of people off, I think it gave a lot of the guys at Westside a massive mental edge, because they were doing something that other people weren't, and they were pushing the boundaries. And I think that it was the attitude at Westside Barbell. That was the attitude of Louis Simmons. It was nothing was ever good enough. And I think that's why he was so successful. But to think that you need them 100% to get stronger is ridiculous. Some of the most explosive people I've ever seen in my entire life never used them. I think a lot of the guys that were strong anyway would have gotten, whether they used bands or not. But I think there was a mental edge to that I think can't be measured. And the other thing I think people need to understand is if you trained at Westside, for the most part, everyone was the same kind of dude, meaning incredibly competitive, 100% dedicated. They were going to go bananas. So I really believe, I know people are going to get upset about this, that whatever they would have done, they would have succeeded. Now, whether or not they would have set all these records, I don't know. I don't know. But you can't, I trained with those guys. I was there. It is a completely different world than what I think other people understand. And it was like, we talk about standards and stuff like that. There was just standards and expectations. So I think that probably had a little more to do with it, because I know people are going to shit on that because the science says this. That's what I believe.
So you think bands weren't that big of either one, not big of a factor, or maybe not a huge percentage in this difference, or what? And I guess on that same point again,
here's the thing: is
thoughts of bands.
A 1% difference at that level is going to make a big change.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the problem I have is, and I've said this a million times, if your kid can't do 20 fucking pull-ups and can't deadlift, trap bar deadlift his body weight, you don't need any of that stuff. Your general physical preparedness is so fucking low. Let's not even do, it drives me nuts. They got all these people doing all this specialty stuff. So I always say, if you can't run a sub 6 minute mile, jump on a 40-inch box, squat double your body weight, with no belt and wraps, then you got no business doing anything fancy.
Well, you might have spared yourself from some of the social media stuff behind bands. So even just as far as specialty, some people are of the thought, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but that somehow bands with variable resistance is somehow superior or can be equal to the results you can get with free weights. I mean, just with that comment alone, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Not to throw the wolves there.
It's literally, I'm going to tell you right now, dude, I coach young kids and I coach novice people. I've taken out many barbells with bands and chains, and that's the last thing I would do with some of these kids. The last thing I need is any kind of instability. I know what it's like coaching 50 kids. You give a kid a band, you know what that thing becomes? 100% becomes a whip. I'm not joking, dude. Like you got a knucklehead 15, 16-year-old kids, and so the last thing I need is anything else. And if one of those bands breaks, so I'm not, that's
well, to play devil's advocate, because I know someone's watching this and then be like, well, I'm talking about me, I'm a mature adult. Can I just train with resistance bands and not use barbell?
So I was in Boston when I got asked this question a million times, and I finally had this epiphany moment. And I said, when it's right, when you stop asking the question and go out and do it, when there's no doubt in your mind. There's one of my favorite movies is Ronin, Robert De Niro, and I can't remember, whatever. And one of the guys had a statement that said, when there is a doubt, there is no doubt. So if you don't know whether or not you use bands or chains, don't use them. And when I first started using them, I was well before I went to Westside. I'd never even questioned them. Like, listen, we're going to set it up. Let's see what happens. Let it rip. But at the other thing too is by the time I started using them, I was very strong. So I'm sure it made some kind of difference, but I still contest, dude. It made me feel like an outlaw. Like I was doing something that you weren't doing. I think that's more like our kids, whether or not, whenever we have a home game, I always said, let's take a look at the field. How many prowler pushes have you guys done around this field? Do you think anyone on the other team has any idea how hard you work? And they're like, no. And that gives them a mental edge. I think that gave me a little bit of a mental edge.
You think some people are bred for work too? I mean, I think some people have that. Like some people have a natural. You've touched on this a few times. I've heard in past interviews or talks on this that we live in this. Obviously, we're like an animal. We're in this state. We don't have to do anything actually physical. And I talked like my dad grew up on a farm and hear what his grandpa did or his dad in the farm, and like the level of physical work and even like the way they ate was just to replenish like this lard with molasses after a meal was like they knew they needed extra calories in. And they like going to bed sore. And I think of like, is that possible in everybody, or is that something that in some people they literally, I think of myself too, like I need to do, even if it doesn't make sense, like I need to do this extra stuff because I feel like my body just wants to get stuff out of me.
I think it can be developed, but there's also a genetic thing to that. There's without a doubt. Like I think, for example, everyone can get stronger. It's just they're not going to be super strong. Like you have to understand that. Just like you and I can play 1,000,000 hours of basketball and do all the drills. We're never going to be Michael Jordan, ever. It's never going to happen. I don't care who you think you are. But I think at a young age, I got so much satisfaction out of accomplishment of my physically doing stuff. And I got a huge mental edge, not just, when I was playing sports, but like whenever I did anything, it couldn't be any worse than this. Like, when I ran hills for an hour and a half and, puked my guts out, like, is this driving test really, like, am I going to get stressed out about this? So I think there is something to that. And I think obviously just from a physiological standpoint, I think some people are just bred to be like the diesel truck, and some people are bred to be the dragster. And you can't train those two people the same. You train the dragster like the dump truck, he's going to break down. You see it all the time, especially in some of these super explosive sports. They can't handle that kind of work. But a lot of times those guys don't need to, obviously physically or psychologically don't need it because they never equated that with success, I guess. But listen, like my friend and I always laugh, like we have to create fake work for us to stay in shape. Right. I always think about those people, who traveled westward, and it's just, Louis C.K. as a joke, it said, when you started off, in New York, and by the time you got to California, your group was entirely different. There's 5 people have died, 6 people were born, a completely different group. So like, I just think it's a luxury. And I say this to on my live streams all the time. I said, at the end, I said, go do something stupid conditioning wise. I think it makes you feel alive. And I think it creates some character more so than any other thing. Like my oldest son and I did a challenge when he was here, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago, where we did 150 squats, 100 push-ups, and 50 chin-ups every 4 hours for 24 hours. So we did 9 rounds of that. So we started at 8, noon, 4, and we were up at midnight, up at 4 a.m., up at, 8 a.m. And then physically, it wasn't hard, right? I mean, your hands hurt from doing all the pull-ups, but it was more like we're doing something stupid. It sucks waking up at 4 in the morning and doing 150 squats and 100, but to this day, that's one of his favorite memory is how I think that gives you something. I remember watching a Joe Rogan show with a hunter. He was like one of those crazy outdoor hunter guys. And he talks about being on Kodiak Island and the wind was atrocious. They got attacked by a bear. The weather was just horrible. I mean, he says one of the worst things he's ever done, and they got attacked by a bear and luckily no one died. And Joe's like, are you going back? Oh, hell yeah. Can't wait. Most memorable trip I've ever had. And I think that kind of misery, I think it's important to do hard stuff because I think like nothing else, you're not going to, like if it's easy and you don't care, you just go out and do something. But man, do you remember waking up at 4 a.m. with your old man to do, a bunch of weight vest stuff or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think
I wanted to hit on that earlier when that was one of my thoughts about the idea of some people getting so into the science and like structured programs where they would say, well, like I just need like the deck of card workout or some randomized workout.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's not, you're wasting your energy. It's not sports specific, but I think there's some value to that just as a physiological, mental level that we need to do stuff like that.
As a coach, you got to be careful about that stuff because it may work for 10 kids and just ruin 40. I really limit a lot of that stuff, or if I do, I always err on the side of a little bit easier. But as a one-on-one, I think for me, I think that stuff is super important. Again, I tell the same, like, listen, make sure, like, I'm not going to set any bench press records or anything like that right now. Okay. But I can grind records now. That's my whole goal. I will grind, and I will, because I know I can physically do it. It's just a matter of, will I grind through it? And I think, so instead of doing I want to squat 1,000 goal. Now my thing is, listen, I want to, walk 100 miles with the weight vest in 3 days or whatever. I know I'm just making that up. Something I know, like it's just going to require me to grind out the horribleness. And, I think that gives you a mental, I really do. At least it does for me. And I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. But the problem is everyone thinks that's how you're training.
Right.
When my training is very simple, very basic, I just kind of, I still work hard, but I'm not killing myself. So I think, and I call the grinded out stuff and all that's social media training. That's the stuff that makes the thing, but that's not how you train. Like I'll never forget, we have coaches all the time trying to come see our kids train, and we don't allow it because I don't want my kids feeling like they're in a fishbowl or something like that. And it distracts from the workout. But one of the coaches my head coach knows very well. He said, listen, dude, I don't know what to tell you, but it's not very impressive. You just have to understand. It's like, it's this, and this, and then we go and run. And he's like, but I'm like, yeah, we might do things a little better, but we're just really consistent. We have high standards. We're very consistent. And so my youngest son, we started training him very early, and it's not like bench presses and squats. We had him do a lot of jumps and stuff, and it was very easy. But I put out a video with what he does, and everyone's like, well, what else do you do? I'm like, that's what we do. It takes 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No, it's got to be more. I'm like, no, dude, we're just consistent. We do it. He knows every day you got to do something. I don't care if it's, a half Murph or you got to go to boxing class or you got football. You got to do something. And so my wife always says consistency is a superpower. And when you're consistent, it's like when you go on vacation, I don't like to train a lot of times on my vacation, but you know what else? 51 weeks, I'm kicking my own ass a little bit. So I can take a week off where, you can have a cheat meal. People get all crazy about that stuff. I try to eat good most of the time. That doesn't bother me. So,
yeah, I think that's an awesome kind of end note to just the value of consistency. I really want to respect your time, but I can go on forever, but I want to respect your time with.
If you got one more question, we can let it rip, brother. If you got anything else.
I really want to plug your stuff here because that's the big thing. Because I respect you. There's some people I'm sure who are watching maybe in the channel who do not have just your materials. They might be asking like, what's the best book to get, the one that makes the most sense. And also, you got tons of merchandise too. I'm going to be ordering myself a hat. I'm either a black or camo one. So you got plug all your stuff on there.
All right. So we have, if you can probably hold up that second edition, that's probably the most. If you just need a good primer. It goes into the very basics of the 5-3-1 program. There's a whole bunch. There's like the Beyond book and the Forever book, and the powerlifting book. Yeah, that thing's a giant thing. That's the
your program for life with this. That's the
The reason why I started training the high school kids is it took me about a year to get all that stuff down because I had my desk is here. I have piles of notes and stuff over the years. And my wife, after I wrote that book, she's like, you got to get the out of the house. Like, you're a horrible human being right now. So I was like, and then that opportunity came up and I was, hemming and hawing about it. But it's funny. That's kind of how it started the coaching. But anyway, I have a private forum. I believe it's $4.99 or $5 a month. And it's taken me a long time to develop this, but you have to post with your real name. That's not unless you're like a first responder. We had some guys in special ops who couldn't do it, but it's just a good community of guys who are offering help. And some of the guys have been training forever. Some of the guys haven't been trained at all. If you've got a question, we've got an answer. It's everything you wanted out of like a training forum that had been ruined by the trolls. So obviously, we can boot people off. We've only had to boot, I think, 2 or 3 people off. So it's a great community. It's awesome to be part of because you kind of know everyone after a while. And in fact, one of the guys on the forum came out and drove to see our team play during one of the playoff games. It was really cool to see. And obviously, JimWendler.com. We do every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. I think I do a YouTube live stream. I just get on here just like and there's questions that come up in the chat and I answer them. And then there's other episodes. You're going to get in. There's not like a million people watching at all. So if you have a question, just go ahead and do it. Ask. I try to answer it as, I always like to say, if I don't know the answer, I'll make something up. But I joke. That's the other thing I laugh about. The older I get, if I don't know the answer, I have no idea. I'm trying to make back in the day. You're like, well, I think maybe, I'm like, dude, I got no fucking clue, especially with the injury stuff. I may have gone to college for 7 years, but I'm not a doctor. So isn't that weird? Like the older you get, you're like, man, I got no idea.
That's great.
I'm okay not knowing that stuff. So I don't know. I think it would be fun to do some one-on-one training. When my oldest son during the pandemic, I trained him. He was a football player, so I trained him using whatever that is. I don't know, FaceTime or Skype or one of those things. And I was like, man, that's really cool. Like you could do some really cool stuff, but that's a lot. I don't know. I love training people, man. I love training. It's just fun. I'll tell you I know this is off topic. One of the kids that played here at London, he went on to play in the Ivy Leagues and I trained him this summer. His mom and dad are friends of us and stuff. And training someone one-on-one when you can start manipulating variables. Oh my God. And this kid's a pipe hitter. Like he's the kid, like you ever have any question about wanting to do something? Like, because you'd be like, all right, whatever, let's go. It's amazing what happens when you get a highly motivated dude. Walking walk through fire. And I was like, I'll never forget. I was training him, and one of the football players who's playing on the team right now came by and was watching for a little bit. He works hard too, great kid. And he looked at how this kid was training. He's like, that dude. And he's like, dude, I love training, but I don't like training this much.
I had one kid he went on to become a Navy SEAL later on. His mom told me, and he went to college and he took college break off, but just straight faced, would do whatever the heck he wanted. He wanted as much as you could throw at him. Yeah. Totally cool. Wouldn't complain. Wouldn't do anything. And sure enough,
this kid
became a Navy SEAL. I was like, oh, this made total sense. So
it's funny because I realized at that point he's a tremendous athlete, like probably the best athlete we've ever had, overall athlete. And then you realize, like, when you have a tremendous athlete, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, and I think, imagine being like Myles Garrett. You ever see Myles Garrett in high school, the football player? You couldn't take enough steroids and train hard enough to look like he did. And he probably did a couple bench presses and a couple lat pull downs. And you think, oh my God, what it must be like. How easy would it be to train like some of these guys? And I watched two super famous NFL players train. And it was the worst training session I've ever seen. And I will say this to the day I'm done. I am super open to anything. I understand. And I was like, dude, if I trained my kids like that, we wouldn't win a single game. And then you're like,
that's like Bo Jackson. I think Bo Jackson is still he didn't they were told to just leave. Like, you're just training, waste your time. Like, you're
dude, it's Bo Jackson. Still, when I watched him run up that wall, I remember it was on the sports. I didn't have cable. It made like the Chicago local Chicago news, and I was like, oh, when he ran up the wall. Do you remember that when he caught the fly ball and then ran up the wall? And I just remember, like, if that's what college football is, like, I better get to work.
I'll plug everything down below. So actually, I have a formal wrap up here, and I'll put everything there. Class act, brother. Appreciate you, living legend. It's an honor talking to you.
Taking the time out for this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.